7 common lighting mistakes or something, and it's like boom, 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 boom. Right? Like as far as just showing the ugliness of it all, we're going to show you what not to do. So today we want to show you some very common mistakes we see with lighting.
The image that comes out of your camera is massively dictated by the lighting. And these mistakes that we see all the time, and they're not just beginner mistakes. We see these actually quite frequently in lighting tutorials. If you search on YouTube for lighting tutorials for beginners, a lot of the tutorials are making these mistakes. And these guys, they know a little bit about lighting, so it's not just a beginning mistake, but these mistakes are actually very easy to fix, especially if you know what to look for. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
And if you want to focus on one thing in your filmmaking or photography, career or hobby that you want to see a huge transformation in, lighting is it, because it can make a huge difference in terms of going from a very professional, excellent looking image to something that feels very amateur and very just not very professional. So if you're going to focus on one thing, lighting is a really good area to see that transformation.
Okay, so let's get into the first mistake that we see very commonly. Okay, before we get into any of our common lighting mistakes, the first thing that we do see from time to time before you do any lighting is white balance. Because if you don't have your white balance set, it'll actually throw off how the camera sees the light and takes the light. And sometimes the lighting is pretty much fine, but the white balance is wrong. And so in this situation, the white balance is off. And sometimes you can't see what's going wrong with the lighting as well if the white balance isn't set well in camera. So you want to set your white balance correctly.
Yeah, so all this is just understanding how to set white balance on your camera. And we have daylight balance lights right now, so all it is going into your camera and changing it onto a daylight balanced setting. So you're telling the camera, this is what light I'm shooting under, and you're matching it. So that makes a huge difference, just setting your white balance to the right. And your lighting maybe isn't off quite as much as you thought it was. So setting your white balance is the first thing you need to do before you do any lighting, just to get clarity on what your lighting is actually doing, and also just help you feel a lot better about your image right off the bat.
So the first mistake we often see people make is we're watching a YouTube video and they're teaching how to do lighting, and we see a setup that looks like this, and Jill goes, that's not right. That's not what it's supposed to look like. So what's wrong with this shot?
So often people try to go almost for like this Rembrandt look, and they'll put the light exactly 90 degrees from the subject. But what that does is that it ends up putting one eye too much in shadow. And when you can't see both eyes really well, it kind of makes a disconnect for your audience. And so Rembrandt lighting is actually, you want to bring it over just a little bit so you can see that there's this triangle of light right underneath your eye, and that this eye is still kind of lit up so you can still see it. But you see it happen very often where it's too contrasty and one eye is too much in shadow. And it's, again, it just makes it so that you kind of disconnect, because eyes are so huge in terms of being able to feel like you can engage with your audience.
Eyes are like super, super important. So when you have eyes in shadow, it makes it so that you can't really, you're not sure whether to trust someone when you can't see their eyes. When you can see their eyes, it makes it so they're open and you can see their eyes. So sometimes you want to hide their eyes or hide an eye and make it so people aren't sure what they're doing. But most of the time, you want to be able to see people's eyes. And eyes are where life is. Eyes are where people connect with the audience or connect with who they're watching. And so when you have it like this, where we can't see somebody's eye, I mean, the other thing about this is you got a light coming right down the middle of her face, like this weird, totally unnatural, like split. Now, you might use this again in narrative for some sort of story, like this is saying she's not quite sure whether she's on the good side or the bad side or something. But most of the time, that's not the story we're trying to tell. Most of the time, this is totally dissonant with what you're trying to do in your video. So how do we fix this?
I'm just going to comment really quick first on your lighting. Look at the camera again. So you'll see Dallas has more of a Rembrandt lighting on his face. He has that triangle of light underneath his eye, and we can still see both eyes. So Dallas, if you just want to take the light and you just move it a little bit over, you'll start to see very quickly that there will be a more pronounced triangle of light. Okay, that's, whoa, back just a little bit, what you want with Rembrandt lighting is to kind of see this, your nose shadow closes into your cheek shadow. And so now you can see that you kind of have this triangle of light there, and my eye is a lot more lit. And that just makes it a lot more of an easier image to connect with.
Okay, so Rembrandt lighting is good if you want drama in your shot, but in most cases, what you should actually be aiming for if you're looking for like on YouTube or an interview or something that's more open, you're talking to the camera, you want a different kind of lighting than Rembrandt because this is still because this is still too dramatic for most situations that you're going to be filming in. Mm-hmm. So what's the alternative?
Okay, so we want to go for more what's called a loop lighting, which is a little bit more open even. So we're going to even move that light even further over. So now it's going to be more at like a 45-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle. It's just a little bit bright because it's close. So loop lighting, it just opens up your face even more, really brightens up your eyes, and it gives that very friendly, welcoming, open feeling. So now what you'll see as far as my nose shadow is you can see that it's still there, but it's not totally connected on the cheek anymore. There's an openness and there's a light that comes through it. And that is what's characteristic of loop lighting, where it's an open loop lighting where now you have a lot more light on the face.
And this is called loop lighting. Why?
Really, with lighting, the nose shadow is what determines often what your lighting is. So loop lighting is just that your nose shadow kind of comes off to the side here a little bit. So Rembrandt is when you have it totally closed in, and then you have an open loop when it's it. So when you're looking at your lighting, really watch your nose shadow and what your nose shadow is doing. Okay, so another thing that you want to do when you're lighting is you want to be looking for catch lights in both eyes. And so what that is that it's just that little tiny, a bright dot of light that you can see in somebody's eyes, and it kind of makes your eye look like it's sparkling. But when you don't have it in both eyes, it
looks like you're dead.
Yeah.
Like when there's no,
yeah, you don't have
with this huge softbox that we have right here, it's a little bit tricky because it's just such a big catch light. Mm-hmm. But there's basically no catch lights here. And especially if you're ever shooting and you intentionally are putting somebody in shadow like this, where their eye is dark and you can't hardly see it, adding a catch light makes a huge difference in that scenario. But in every scenario where you want somebody to feel like they're alive and you can connect with them, that catch light makes a huge difference. So sometimes that's making sure that key light is in a place where it's reflecting. And then sometimes if you can't get that, sometimes you could just get like your phone or like a flashlight and put it off camera, off the side where it's not shining into the scene, but put it in such a way, have somebody hold it where it's creating a catch light, just to make sure you have that catch light. Because when there isn't that catch light, it just looks flat and dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so the catch light is really the sparkle in the eye, and that's when you tell that you have both eyes lit, is when you can see that sparkle. So if you want to just move the light over again, Dallas, and you'll see as it moves over, you'll start to see these two bright white dots in my eye, and that just adds the sparkle, it adds the life, and it also like just makes somebody look a lot happier. Okay, so another problem is where people place their fill, or this is often like the second light that they use to light a set. So in the case of Rembrandt, we were worried about we had too much shadow and our eyes weren't lit. It just looked too dark. Fill is on the opposite end of that, is that people want it to be bright and they're so worried about shadow that they just take out shadow altogether. So, woo, bright. Turn it down a little. Yeah. So now you see that my shadow on my face has been completely eliminated and it just looks flat. There's a lot of people that light like this and it takes away all definition. Shadows are good things. You just need to learn.
This should be a rookie mistake, but it's not. You watch the news, you're going to see this mistake all the time. People who should know better make this mistake all the time, that there's nothing there. It's just so flat and boring.
And then the other thing with that is that now all of a sudden you have two catch lights in your eyes, and depending how you do this, it can look very unnatural and weird sometimes, just depending on how the catch lights hit. So a fill is not meant to just totally fill in your shadow and be the same as your softbox. So one of the reasons that this feels very unnatural is that most of the time things are lit as if from one source. And you think about outside, when we go outside, you have the sun, you have one light source. It's not two. And so you always see shadows. And so not having shadow feels really unnatural. And so when you're lighting your image, you really want to light it as if you are lighting it from a single source. You're not wanting to get rid of shadow or light it from two sources. So how you would actually use a fill, if you wanted to, is that you would put it directly behind the camera. So right now we have our key light at about 45 degrees. If you actually wanted to use a fill, you would put it directly behind the camera and you would turn it down so it's less than the key. And really what you want is it's not there to take away the shadow. It's just there to soften it a little bit, make it a little bit, yeah. So you see right now, I still have shadow. So right now we have the shadow. It's a little bit more, it's a deeper shadow. It's more contrast. It just softens that shadow a little bit more so that it's not quite as strong. If again, you're going for an even more softer, more open feel. So again, Dallas, just turn it off, turn it on so we can see the difference again. So again, we have the fill on and we have the fill off. And you can just see that it changes the way that the shadow, just how deep the shadow is. So depending on how soft you're wanting to make your subject, often sometimes with women, they like a little bit more softer, feminine, and with men you want more shadow.
And the look of the film you're creating, you want to take into consideration what kind of how deep those shadows are, because sometimes you don't want a really hard, deep shadow. You sometimes want a softer, brighter shadow, and because the less shadow there is, the less drama there is. The harder, the deeper the shadow is, the more drama there is. So that's one of the reasons you play with that. Most of the time, you don't need a fill because there's enough bounce around in a room that there's going to be light bouncing off other surfaces. You don't need to use another light even for a fill. You can often just bounce it off a wall or bounce it off a piece of cardstock or a reflector. That's more than enough because you don't want to make somebody look like a tomato, a flat, they're underneath hot lights, they're getting warm, and then you put both lights on both sides and now they're just a big red blob. That doesn't look good.
Often for us, what we actually end up opting to do is just get a bigger light and get a really big softbox. And then the softbox wraps around and really ends up acting as your key and your fill both together because it's so soft and bright. So adding a larger diffusion and a bigger light source, pretty much for us, it means we eliminate the fill and then we're not worried about two different catch lights in the eyes that look more unnatural. There's another common lighting setup that people will do is it's kind of like trying to go for the Rembrandt and then you try to compensate for the overshadow. And what they end up doing is they end up putting both lights at 90 degrees. And so you have a key light on one side and you have a fill light on your other side, which again, it ends up being two light sources. It doesn't feel natural. Dallas is going to turn this on so that you can see. And what it ends up doing is it makes this bright spot on both sides of your face and it ends up putting this weird shadow right down the middle of your nose. That's not a very natural lighting. I see this, and sometimes like when you're looking at it, it doesn't look that terrible, that they can get it to look half decent, but when you actually think about what it's doing and the shadows and where the shadows are being created, it's a very unnatural, unflattering light. And again, when you're lighting, you really want to look at where your shadows are. And so to have two just lights with then the middle being dark, it doesn't open your face or make it feel super welcoming. It kind of feels weird with the shadows, where the shadows are, and takes away some of that definition.
So once again, the way that you fix this is to move your key light over significantly, because right now it's right there. It's like 90 degrees. So you want it at least 45, and probably turn off this fill light altogether or move it also towards the camera so that it's not creating this weird whatever's going on here.
Actually, what I think we could demonstrate is just going, it's not necessarily bad to have the light right across from each other, but what I would do is I would just totally shift this 45. So if you do that, we put the key right here, we put this light here. Now, all of a sudden, this light isn't going to be on my cheek. I'll still have a cheek shadow, but it's going to act more as what's called a kicker. So it's just going to be this really pretty hair light. So I do it even more, Dallas, just because, if you can, because you can't see it.
Plug's a little short. Yeah.
So now what you have is you have this this highlight that's on my hair, but you still have the shadow on my cheek, right? So we haven't totally eliminated the shadow on here. We see that we still have the nose shadow here. And so that shadow is still there to add depth to the face, but we've just added a little bit of highlight and kind of that halo in the hair, which is really pretty. And that's called a kicker. So if you want to put a second light back there, just make sure that it's actually back far enough that it's not actually really lighting your cheek and taking away that shadow.
And that light would usually, you could just move it off camera a little bit and you'd get the same effect. That's not too hard. I just put it in so we can see it in this setup and you can kind of see what's going on.
All right, let's talk about this ugly mess.
Sometimes I think people do something like this. It'll look a little different person to person because they think it's dramatic and like I'm in a dark lair talking to my YouTube camera.
Mm-hmm.
And reality is it looks like mud
Mm-hmm.
and it is so gross to look at. It's yeah.
So one of the problems with this lighting is it's your ratios between your background light and your subject's light. So what ended up happening in this lighting is that the key light that's lighting my face isn't exposed very well. It's underexposed, which kind of makes my face look muddy. And then we have a background light that's way too bright. So what ends up happening often is that our eye is drawn to the brightest part of the image. And so often what we want to do is we want to make the face the brightest part. So people's eye is drawn to your face. Sometimes if you're going for more high key, bright, having a brighter background is okay. But if you do that, you still want to have the face very bright in the midst of that. Most of the time though, if you have your face as the brightest part of the image, it's going to draw your eye to the face and it's not going to bring this distraction between the background and your face.
Because just another part of this is that I was actually watching a tutorial again on how to light for beginners, and it looked like this at the end. And he was actually doing most of the things correctly. He had the lights in the right position, he had the right idea down, but it ended up looking very bland and muddy because he had his ratios wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how do we fix it?
So if you just go turn down that background light for one. Down, down, down. Okay, so now we still have the background light. So if you turn it on and turn it off just so we can see the difference. Okay, so turn it on. So the background light's still there now, but it's way less. I might even bring it down just a tad bit more actually. And then what we would do is we would come and we'd take our key and we'd brighten that. So now the key is lighting my face to be the brightest part of the image. And so we can see just even doing that, it's like, okay, that's that. Bring it down just a tad. Even doing that now has totally shifted your eye's focus to where you're not distracted by this background. You still got the depth of the background because we've lit that, but my face is definitely the brightest part of the image. And that is going to be huge as far as just, what is it going to be huge as far as, I don't know. It's going to be huge as far as making your images look way better.
A lot more pleasant to look at and make it so that people can actually focus on what they're supposed to focus on. They're not so distracted. When you have a dynamic image, it makes it easier for your viewer to concentrate and focus on what they're supposed to be focusing on. So you don't want your lighting to be dissonant to the message that you're saying. If you're saying something dramatic and it's flat, you know, we've all seen indie short films where there's this dramatic moment and it looks like they're in an office and there's no drama whatsoever. In that situation, you don't want something like this. You want something that's dramatic. You want that Rembrandt lighting. Whereas in a situation where we're teaching like this, and we're talking to the camera, and it's supposed to be open and bright and friendly, and you need to be able to focus on us, you need this open lighting, but the contrast ratios need to be there too, so that you know to look at us, and the background is ambience, not the thing that we're focusing on.
I think one of your jobs as being a filmmaker or being a photographer is just taking away that distraction and making it so people can really focus on your message and what you're saying. And one of the ways of pursuing and doing it with excellence is being able to have a very cohesive, undistracting image. Because sometimes we don't realize how much lighting actually can really affect how much we get distracted with the image. And we don't even realize why we're agitated or we're distracted. But it's because the lighting wasn't done well. And then another problem that a lot of people light with is adding no diffusion to your light. So this light, it has no diffusion. It's just a raw, hard light on my face. And you can see the shadows are very defined. You can see the edges very easy with my nose and on my cheek. It's just a little bit more unflattering. It kind of feels like this glaring light on my face. So we're going to turn this hard light off and we're going to put on a diffused light, which is just softening it. So that's like soft boxes, umbrellas, bouncing it off white walls, anything like that is going to soften your light a lot. So watch the shadows as this transition happens. Way softer shadows. Now these lights are in pretty much exactly the same place, right? They're in pretty much exactly the same place. The difference is that one has absolutely no diffusion on it and one has a very large giant softbox that has 2 levels of diffusion in it. And that's just going to really soften your shadow, make it more flattering. And this is where I say often we don't use a fill because we just put in a really large soft box and that kind of wraps around and softens your shadows. There's the hard light, harsh light. Very unflattering.
And once again, there might be reasons you want to use this, but in most lighting tutorials that we're seeing, most applications of this that we would be seeing on YouTube, this is not what you want. This can be used like it's kind of almost a film noir style. There's like a lot of drama here. It's very gritty feeling. But once again, if I'm talking about camera equipment or teaching people how to do things, a tutorial or doing a vlog or something, it's very dissonant unless I'm talking about something awful that's happening. But even then, it just doesn't match. So you want to make sure that your lighting style matches what you're doing. And the way to fix this is just to put some sort of diffusion on there. That could be a bed sheet, that could be bouncing it off an umbrella.
Actually, you just show quick if you bounce it off the wall, our gray wall over here.
Yeah, we could do that.
Just turn it and bounce it just simply off the wall. Same exact light, same spot. All we're doing is we're going to turn it so it's bouncing off the wall. This is going to increase the size of the light because it's bouncing off the whole wall and it's going to create a level of diffusion in there. Okay, and then just turn it up. Right? Totally different light. Look, like it is the same light, but all it is it just bounced off a gray wall. Does it go up any higher than that, Dallas, or that's as high as it goes?
That's as high as it goes.
Okay. So that's the one thing you have with bounce is that you lose quite a bit of light in between as far as it. But that is a nice light all of a sudden. That's a very soft light. Same light. All we did is turned it 90 degrees so it faced the wall, bounced off, hit my face, and now it's so much more flattering.
All right, so now you know the mistakes, you know what to look for, and you know how to fix them. If you want to learn more about how to light your videos to make them look amazing, like this one, you can click on the video that's right there that'll show you how to get amazing lighting on a very low budget. Be well worth your time. We'll see you next time. Bye.